Hi everyone, and a warm welcome. My name is Paul Apps and this is my wildlife art channel, and what I want to talk to you all about today is all things acrylic and maybe a little painting using acrylic at the end of this video. So without further ado, let's roll that intro and let's see what happened. Hi everybody, and a warm welcome back. Now, as I said just now, I would like to talk to you all about painting and acrylics today. It will be a scant overview of the whole subject. It's a deep subject, there's a lot to think about, and I'm not going to get all of that out to you today in this video. Plus, I would also like to do a little bit of painting and acrylics at the end of this video, just to show you how I go about things. But I would like to discuss with you some of the thoughts and considerations you need to make when you're getting involved with acrylic painting. Now, I know many of you probably already paint in acrylics, and a lot of what I'm going to say you probably already are aware of, but there are many people out there, and I see them come into my gallery, into my classes there, where they want to get involved with acrylics, but they don't really understand what's involved, what paints to get, what brushes to use, how to take care of the paint when it's on a palette, all these little things. So I want to briefly look at that and show you what I do, and then, as I say, if there's time, I want to flip over and do a little bit of work on a Cape hunting dog, which I will tell you more about when we get there. And so yeah, let's talk about all things acrylic and see what happens. Okay, before we go any further then, let's just take a little time to look at some of the surfaces that you can employ to paint your acrylics on. Now, if you're a fine artist, then of course it's going to be a two-dimensional flat surface, paper, canvas, something that's correctly prepared for the job. Indeed, acrylics are so versatile that you can use them throughout the craft industry and even the model making industry. If you prepare your surface right, there's pretty much nothing that you can't actually paint upon, and it's just about the preparation. So when people come in, they say, well, what can I use, what should I do? You could use the finest watercolor paper. If you prepare it with a gesso first, you can paint on it. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a rather expensive way of using a surface. I just wanted to describe that as an extreme. What I've got here are sort of 3 or 4 different bits of paper and canvas and board, and indeed a white prepared canvas. Now, I rarely, if ever, paint on a pure white canvas. I would treat this with an acrylic color to prepare it for whatever I wanted to use it for. But it's just a standard cotton canvas with it's just a nice linen canvas, this particular one. But I will do my next wildlife piece on this one, or my next major piece. Now, as regards everything else, if you're just practicing, you don't really want to go and spend tons and tons of money. So you can buy into so many things. This is just what's left of a block of paper. This is an acrylic paper. It's mold made, and it's got a bit of a texture weave in it, and it comes on a block. This one's sort of been around a little while, and there's only a few pages left on here to work with, but essentially it's a paper that you then, or at least has been prepared for you, the artist, to put your acrylics on. Now, this paper is not an acrylic paper. You can buy an acrylic paper. It looks exactly the same and has the same responses. This is one for oils as well, but you could paint acrylics on it, no problems at all. And if you want to go further than that, you can put an acrylic gesso compound on the top to take the white away and just give you a color. Indeed, if I was to take this one apart, there should be a couple more sheets there, and they would be, if I can just show you that without destroying it, they will be as white as the piece of paper is here. All I've done is taken the next sheet on the block there, painted it off, and it's ready to go. If you have odd bits of canvas, I was fortunate many years ago that I had a whole load of A3 canvas sheets for my printer, Now my printer at the time, I discovered later, wouldn't take them. So they were sitting around for an awful long time. So I simply cut them down, gessoed them up, and I have a canvas. Simple as that. Floppy as you like, and you was just literally take that down to a board. You can even adhere that to some MDF so you make it rigid, whatever you want to do, but it's a surface that you can paint on. So we've covered paper, we have covered designed paper. This is paper that is designed to take acrylic or oil, and they come in blocks or in pads. This is canvas. This is yet another one. This is actually what we may paint a little later, but this is just 2.4mm MDF from a picture framing source, and you can cut this to size. You can put a couple of coats of gesso on the top, and then you can put a color coat on there. I've done my drawing, and I actually went over this with some clear gesso, which you can buy. It's a little more expensive than white gesso, but a clear gesso so you can seal your drawing in, so it doesn't matter what mistakes you may make with this going further down the road. It matters not. It's there, it's safe. And all I've done is a light sand off with some very fine grit paper just to smooth off this surface. Now there's a lot of talk about surfaces regarding the actual surface itself. I like pretty much a smoothish surface. Too smooth and the paint will just slide and it's not great. And you find the same thing when you're talking about charcoal as well. But a little tooth in your acrylic painting is ideal. It's not essential. I use a lot of hot press type papers, and you can prepare those, or you can use, as I say, you can buy this mold made paper which has got a very, very fine tooth. And indeed, coating this over a couple of times with a color will allow you then to just keep it on the flat and just smooth it off with a very, very fine piece of sandpaper. And I'm talking about a 600 grit plus, something that's not going to do damage to the surface, not going to take this back to paper, but will give you a nice smooth finish. So that's just a quick look at a few surfaces. What I'm trying to suggest to you is that if you prepare it with a gesso or even a commercial undercoat, which has got more impurities in it, but if you're just practicing, maybe it's a good way to go, is to give a coat of something so it will accept an acrylic nicely, and just practice and play away with it. Have fun. So that is a quick look. As I say, anyone out there who wants more information on stuff, then let me know in the comments under this video, and I will be happy to make another video with a bit more detail in it. Okay, so let's just quickly look at brushes. One thing I would say about acrylics is that you really do not want to mix your brushes up if you paint sometimes in oil, because the oil residue can affect the flow and the condition of a brush. Okay, so one of the brushes that I really like a lot of are these ones called Evergreen. Now they're quite a nice soft springy nylon, but one thing you'll notice here, all the brushes in this pack are non animal hair, and they are not bristle or anything like that. These are all synthetic brushes, and they're all made by Rosemary and Company. And indeed, if you want to get some, go onto Rosemary's website, check out there and add the details of my name at the affiliate link on checkout, and I get a little thank you. You don't pay any more, but it just helps me out. So I'll be grateful to that. But these brushes really are fantastic brushes, and a synthetic brush. I know there's a couple of extra ones in here that maybe shouldn't be in there, but essentially they're all Rosemary's. But the nice thing about a soft filament like a synthetic brush, it just delivers the acrylic in a very, very nice way. So that's quick look at the brushes. What I would say is, if you can afford long handle ones, it gets you away from the work a little easier, and is well worth buying a long handle brush over a short handle brush, which tends to make you get very, very close to the subject and not always advisable. That's just a little point. Okay, so that's brushes. So we're whipping through this pretty fast. Now then, paints. Now this is the big thing. Whose do you buy? What do you buy? Quality wise, etc., etc. Well, many years ago, I had the good fortune to work for quite a number of materials manufacturers, Winsor and Newton, Staedtler, others. There used to be art fairs around the country. One of the big ones was in a place called Islington in London, and I used to be up there every year teaching and promoting and painting in different companies' paints. Now, for the best part of that time, I was really logged in, as it were, or committed to Liquitex. Now, Liquitex as a brand, when I first started, were fairly new to me, but I soon got into them, and I started demonstrating for them. I don't know, it seems like 150 years ago now, but it was probably around about 25 or 6 years ago. I may have that wrong, but it's no less than that. It could be a little bit more. But I had access to their paint supplies. All I needed to do, and I was thankful for it, got to say, all I needed to do was ring them up and say, look, can I have X of this, one of these, or whatever. And down the post they would come as good as gold. And I had marvellous supplies of Liquitex paints. Now, the brand has changed in terms of the look on these tubes has changed over the years, and indeed they call them soft or heavy body. But back then, these were the heavy body, and the soft body come in little tubs. I've got as many of those as I've got of these. I have got a whole raft of these. Some have gone dry over the years, but many, and I do mean probably 80%, 85% of them, are still looking as good as they did the day that they were sent down the line. Bit dirtier, but still work. Now, over those years, I have used them on and off, but more lately I sort of wondered, after 20 odd years, 25 plus years, are these still good? Does the binder that makes them work still work as fine? Will it stay on a piece of board? Will it stay, or will it start flaking off? So I actually sent Liquitex a detailed request to find out from their technical department if they had any information on the longevity of these. And indeed, again, if you guys have a better knowledge than I do as to how old an acrylic will last, let me know. I'd love to know, because what I've actually just done, and I'll just get this out and show you, what I've done in the last week or so is I've just reinvested in the colours that I would generally use in the old colours in the new lineup. Now, these are just arrived. They are the equivalents to these. They're heavy body paints, and they are just fresh. Now, I know that these will work seamlessly, not a problem. I'm not saying these won't, but I just need to know, can I keep using these? So if anybody out there knows whether I can and can't, whether I should just bin them or set them into some antique store, because that's where they are, then let me know. But anyway, in the short term, getting rid of those, I've gone to these. But I also have to say that in my time between all of that, I invested a lot into Winsor and Newton paints. Now, Winsor and Newton, as good as Liquitex. I wouldn't knock either of them, and I've demonstrated for both of them in the past. The artist acrylic quality are always advisable. I know both ranges do cheaper versions, and I have this argument with so many people, the conversation with so many people, that at the end of the day, they say, well, I'm only practicing. I don't really need high-end stuff. I always say, certainly with oils and watercolor, that if you can afford the best, then that would always be the best way to go, because the content of the pigment is so much more refined in those materials. With acrylics, it's a little different in my thoughts. I've been thinking about this for some time, and I feel that if you can afford artist quality, then get artist quality, because they will be so much more beneficial. There's more pigment factors, there are less of the hues, and the hues are mimics. They're not true versions. So if you get something that says maybe cadmium yellow hue, you know it's not a true cadmium yellow. It is a mimic to represent and make it look a little bit like that. But sometimes when you add white to those, they go off. Instead of going from dark acrylic to a pale yellow, they veer off slightly and change their look as you add more white to it. So if you can afford artist quality, do so. But there has to be a lot said that I know even professional artists out there who use cheaper graduate colors, cheaper student colors, and yeah, they do a good job with them. How good they are over a long time, I do not know. And I suppose at the end of the day, if they last 50, 60 years, do we need to worry? I don't know. The jury's out on that. But I've always used an argument that if the commercially produced artist quality are exactly the same for student quality, then why would you want to buy artist quality when student quality would do the job for you? So there has to be a difference, and I think it has to come down to quality of the paint and impurities and the amount of pigment set within each color. So my take away from that is to suggest to everybody, whatever medium you're buying into, try and buy artist quality. You don't need to buy the whole raft of every color that your color manufacturer does, whether it's Liquitex, whether it's Winsor & Newton, whether it's one of the other manufacturers out there, and there are many. You don't have to buy into every color that they produce. I certainly don't. But what I will say is that if you just bought the primary colors, maybe a split primary set, which would be maybe ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, cadmium yellow, cadmium lemon, cadmium red light, alizarin crimson or magenta, a good white, and maybe a burnt umber or a couple of the earth colors, which are dirt cheap anyway, you've got yourself a lovely little set of colors, but you've got them in artist quality. So I'm not going to keep banging on about that, but really and truly give it a thought. It can be easy to get a whole set for 15, 20 quid, 30 quid, whatever they come out at. But certainly if you spend a little bit more, get fewer colors and get a good split primary set with a couple of earth colors to help darken colors and things like that, I think you'll be good to go. And then you can add to those color ranges as indeed you become more happy with regards to the acrylics. Okay, what else do you really need? Well, this is, in my mind, this is a biggie. And lots of people sort of mess up when they come to paint in acrylics, and they simply put them on a plastic plate or a china plate and wonder why at the end of a session they've all dried up, coated over, and they can't use them anymore. And it's frustrating to say the least, but it's also very, very wasteful on good quality paint. And not such a waste, I suppose, if it's cheaper paint, but even so, you don't want to waste it more than you need to. So you need to find a way to preserve and extend the way that your paints work. Now this is what's called a Rowney Stay Wet palette. It comes with a plastic lid that mimics this. It's probably, in my opinion, I don't know, just take this out, but this is a vacuum formed product. I think a piece of plastic goes in and under heat and whatever, it becomes vacuum formed and creates this. You get a percentage of like blotting paper to go underneath this and a surface to put on top. You only get so many before you have to start making replacements or buying replacement packs. Now, one thing I've got to say, and I'm going to say this, whether some of you agree or some of you not, it might be a little contentious. I hope it's not. But for me, when I started all those years ago painting in acrylics, these palettes were pretty much the only ones out there. There was this one, the big one, which is about 20 inches across here and about, I don't know, 11, 14 inches, probably 11 inches or so across here. And then there's a smaller one, somewhere about like that. Back in the day, these were pretty much the only way of using a stay wet palette or having a stay wet palette and making your paints last longer and having an area to mix on as well, which indeed, if it's all sealed off, those mixes will stay a little while as well before drying out. Now, back then, these were only a few pounds, probably about £20 for this one, maybe £19, and I think about £12-13 for the small one. But today, I got a shock. I looked at these the other day and realized that these are being sold in excess of 40, almost £50, I think, for one of these. And certainly the small one is now about £39-40. To me, for a vacuum packed product, I know the intervening years have not been cheap for many companies, but to me that is extremely expensive, and I personally will not go out and buy another one of these. Now I will say, in addition, there are other things you can employ. You don't need to go out and spend a lot of money on one of these, but you can get a stay wet palette from a well-known manufacturer, and that is one called the Acrylic stay wet palette. It's slightly narrower. It's about 9 inches or so wide, and it's about, I think, about 14 inches long. So it's about 2/3 of this one, but it only costs you around about £14 to £15, and it's a lot lighter to use. And indeed, I'm thinking at some point I might get one when this one goes, and at least I will give it a try out and see how it performs. But the company in the UK for that will be the Society of All Artists. If you go to the SAA shop online and look it up, I think, if you remember, you get it even cheaper still. I think you can get it for about £12 or something, and I think the replacement pieces of paper are only around about £3 or £4 a set. So it's a far more doable price than this one. As I say, at some point I may well try one out and see what I personally think about it. I've got them in the past from my students and they seem very happy with them. I never did because I had this, but this one is starting to show signs of its age, and it won't be too long before this gets too brittle, starts cracking, and I got to buy another one anyway. But enough said, and I've ranted on about this. I think that this was once a great buy. Today I think it's a little bit of an extortive buy, if that is even a word. But I think that you can do better for much less money than buying into this. I think that it's a little bit more flimsy than some of the others anyway. Right, rant over. Let's carry on with the idea of this. So the idea of a stay wet palette is to have an absorbent layer underneath that has been wetted up under your cold tap. You then just let it drain off, take out the excess water, so you've got a very moist surface, and then you have something like this. Now this is a piece of glassine paper. I would probably recommend more easily obtainable roll of greaseproof paper, so you don't even need to buy into extra proprietary paper. You need something. This is a piece under here. This is a piece of old watercolor paper that got damaged. It's working perfectly with its absorbency to take on all that water and keep everything wet, and you have a different substrate than those proprietary brands will offer you. But it will keep going, and it will keep going, and it will keep going. And the idea is that when it starts to dry out on a project that you're painting on, simply take a spray bottle, wet it down, keep your paints nice and fluid as it were, and not skinning up. And then when you finish painting, you simply put the lid on top and put it level. Make sure it's level for another day, so that you indeed don't have any issues with this moving forward. Now, another way around, if you don't want to buy out on any stay wet palette, is to find something that's got a shallow wall as big as you can. Often people use deep dinner plates, but even things like a metal baking tray, something of that nature, even some of these ready-made type boxes, you know, these plastic boxes with clip lids, anything like that. You don't want it too deep, otherwise it becomes a pain to put your brush into and dip into. But something quite shallow is all you need, as large as you can make it, and then put a film of blotting paper or something similar on the bottom. Even things like several layers of kitchen roll. I used to use that extensively, just kitchen roll, 3 or 4 layers, wet it up, tap it down, and then put my greaseproof on top of that. You don't even need to bite into one of these. So I'm ranting on a little bit, but I think it was important to cover this because a lot of people sort of come to class when they want to start doing acrylics, and all of a sudden it's a bit of a problem because they're putting their paints out and they're drying out before they even really get started. But a stay wet palette in one description or another will work fine. Now there's paint got underneath here, that's why there's all these blotchy colours. So okay, what do I need now? Well, I've also got to look at what colours I'm going to be using, and I'm just going to quickly work through all of the different colours and set them out in the order that I normally like them set out in. So one thing worth noting here, although I'm going up the side of this palette, it's only because I have way too many paints that I want to get included in it. But I always start off with my darkest colours, my earth tones, my greens, then my blues, my reds, and finally yellows to white. I always lay out all my palettes, oil, acrylic, everything in this manner. Worth doing. Now there is one colour that you cannot buy today. I have about 3 tubes of this left, and I'm sorry it's not going to help you guys out, but I'm going to put a little bit there. It's called Acrylic. Now I think it's a name suggesting like a phthalo colour, like a transparent quinacridone colour, but it's a lovely transparent glazing colour, and it was stopped, or they had to withdraw it from sale. Liquitex on one about had to withdraw that from sale 20 odd years ago, and I sort of raided their stocks as best I could, and I've got about 3 tubes left, and I hold it in high regard. It's a lovely colour, and shame that I can't find anything to replace it. And I'm going to put a little tap out each of those, and we're done. Okay, so having said that you don't need all of those, I have got them there, and I've even missed a couple off, which, as I said just now, it's not a big deal, but you really do not need to have so many paints that you have to sort of break the bank to go and get a selection. Just get a few, maybe get the 2 blues, I said, the 2 reds, 2 yellows, white, and a couple of these along here, and you'll be good to go. And you can mix pretty much everything else you need to do that. In fact, that's not a bad way of doing it, because you learn so much more from actual color mixing instead of just picking stuff up on here and going with it. As for brushes, again, I've got way too many for the job. I'm never going to use half of these in such a long time. What I tend to do is I end up with a couple of riggers. Get a couple out, they're all wedged in there. So a couple of riggers, 1, 2 will be fine. Let's put them to one side. And what else do I tend to go to? Well, I have a small flat maybe, and a medium flat. So I've got 2. Let's put them so you can see them. So I've got a flat, so a number 4 and a number 1, I believe. That's it really. So I'm going to put those to one side. We're going to work on this now. This is, if you didn't already realize, is a Cape hunting dog. The reference is probably about 30 years old. I took this as a photograph, so the quality of the image is not brilliant, but I will put a line art for it up for you guys who are watching this on my Patreon. And indeed, if you are on YouTube watching this and you want to have a go at it yourself, the line art and the reference photo will be on my Patreon for you to freely download. You do not need to be a patron to do that. Okay, it's well worth noting here that if this had been an oil painting, I could have come unstuck had I not sealed off the drawing as I have done here with either gloss medium varnish or matte medium varnish or clear gesso, because when I did the drawing some years ago, I wasn't sure whether I was ever going to paint it in oil or acrylic. I hadn't made that decision. And as it happens, working in acrylics now, all I'm really doing is doing what I would have done in oil. In other words, with the drawing protected, I've gone over the drawing now with the paint to darken up and reinforce the lines so that if I did make a mistake and wiped back, I would not lose the drawing underneath. And let's come in with a thicker brush, and I'm going to be using pretty much the same color. I'm going to put a little sap green to it and a little bit of purple, green and purple, and neutralizing each other out. And I am going to come in quite literally and block it all out to a dark color. Although this blocking is initially quite a warm violet and green mix, quite dark, as I come down I start to lighten it up. I add some cooler colors, a little bit more white as we descend lower and lower to create a bit of a path, but also to suggest the foreground too. So we've got this lighter passage between the darker foreground passage. Okay, so onto my next layer. I'm going to go back to that small number 2 flat, and I'm going to come in with some more color in terms of Naples yellow, a bit of white, but I want to keep some of it bright and some of it cool. But initially I just want mid-tones. Just remembering that working from mid-tones, I can go lighter, I can go darker, but because essentially a lot of this animal is in the shade, these mid-tones are muted cool colors, and that's what I'm trying to do to set up between that and the dark fur. But our dog is starting to take a little bit of shape. I'm going to come in with a bit of a pale color now, a little bit of white into my Naples yellow, or vice versa. Come in here with a nice bright mark over the eyes, and this is where the sun's catching most of the animal. While I'm painting this, all the time I'm thinking the direction of the fur, using the brush to suggest the angle and the direction of that fur, and also considering the length of that fur, whether it's short, whether it's long. This has been drying off. What I would like to do is just put a bit of light color in here while we're at it. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to use that little soft white brush. Okay, after a few minutes I actually changed that little soft brush out. It's a beautiful brush, but probably better used for watercolor than acrylic, so I swapped it out for my rigger. But I wanted to get some very fine details at the start, around the head, around the face, the eyes, the nose, whilst putting or suggesting a little extra mark or two into the background. But the front of the head is the most point. It's the key part of my painting. It's the focal point. So it has to read right, it has to look right, and that's why I spend such an awful long time deciding and perfecting it. A lot of work being done on the head. Of course, that's the first thing that when you're looking at a picture they really start looking at. So you have to have this as good or as right as it possibly can be. It is important. Okay, so I make no excuse for sticking with the rigger, and I am jumping all over the animal with different little color notes, some warm, some cool, some light, some dark. Every time I look and I mix a color and I put it down somewhere, it's to try and address something that I feel needs a little bit more attention, a little bit more detail, and also improving the contrast between the various lights and darks on the animal's coat overall. I've got a lot more dark to come into this area, to be fair. This is still way too light. I'm just trying to mix it up a little bit to make it work. And I want to get a lot darker and come here with some sienna and a little bit of umber, but I want to cool it with some ultramarine. I want a dirtier colour as coming down the side here. Now this is in a lot of shade and shadow, but as I've just said, that a lot of this animal, especially around the tummy area, the legs and what have you, are all in dark shadow. Even some of the white coat is a lovely blue, but those blue colors really react with the lovely oranges and earthy colors in the coat, so it works to my favor. Okay, I'm going to leave that like that. It may not be absolutely 100%, but it's not that far off. There's a shape that's missing here. I'm going to put that in. As I draw closer to the end of this painting, it is all about the detail. It's all about crossing the T's and dotting the I's and making sure your observational skills are working overtime, just to make sure that you have got all that detail where you want it to be, including, as you can see here, working on the background, suggesting that there are little bits of foliage coming all the way down to immediately behind the animal and into the foreground itself. It makes it more convincing. Okay, now then, let's just quickly look then at our muzzle. I want to put a little bit of blue violet colour, a little bit of diazine purple, a little bit of blue. Just come in and influence that lovely little wet nose look of the top of the nose there, a little bit on this side as well. We really are down to the final stages of this painting, and I'm allowing the brush to scribble notes all over the place in the background, the midground and the foreground. I'm using slightly different tones of colour to suggest twigs, branches, grasses, and indeed that all-important shadow around the feet of the animal itself. That tiny little bit of contrast of the shadow really works to great effect and throws the animal out and sets it up. I'm just making a few more studies around the nose and the teeth and the tongue and over the remaining parts of the body. It really is done, but I am just working, as I said earlier, very hard to make sure I haven't missed anything, and I've done as much as I possibly can. And I think that that's probably going to be it. One thing I've just seen I want to do, and I want to put in a slightly blue but mainly light highlight. Now that's coming down through there on that leg, but then it's just catching that pad there. I think that's all that needed, and there's a little bit here. I've missed this toe. Look at that. How bad of me is that? Missed that toe. Haven't finished that leg off. There's that pad coming down through here on that leg. Just when you think you're finished, you see something else, and I missed those all-important sparkles of highlight around the feet, and indeed the feet themselves, so it had to be completed. Alright, I think that really is sorted, and there's probably as much as I'm going to actually get done in this session. There we go, one signed dog. Okay everybody, one picture of a Cape hunting dog, or indeed a painted dog, depending on which name you know it by. But I had a lot of fun doing it, and I do hope that you enjoyed the process, not only of the painting, but also a little insight, albeit brief, on how to get involved with acrylic paintings. Now, don't forget, as I always say, if you've enjoyed this and you want more, then please like and subscribe to the channel. Click that notification bell and it tells you every time I upload new content. And if you want to add comments and thoughts, then please comment below. I read each and every one and I enjoy them, and I'll always answer them. And if you've got any ideas, whether you want a particular animal, if I can manage that, or indeed a medium, whether it's oil, watercolor, charcoal, pastel, it doesn't matter. I'm happy with all mediums. This one just happens to be acrylic, and right now I'm really quite into my acrylics, to be fair. But if anything you want to see in the future, please jot it down, put it in the comments. I'll read it, I'll log it, and hopefully at some point I can do a video with those requirements. But in the meantime, I'm going to think about what I'm going to do next. Not sure what it's going to be, but hopefully you'll join me for whatever it is, and I'll catch you all in a future video. And in the meantime, stay safe wherever you are, have fun, enjoy your painting, keep those brushes moving. Catch you all in the next one very soon. Bye bye.